I never thought I'd be the woman standing in a bathroom at 2 a.m., holding pregnancy test instructions in one hand, and my phone recording my husband's midnight phone conversations in the other. But when your husband refuses to touch you for 8 months and then suddenly becomes obsessed with getting you pregnant, you start to question everything you thought you knew about the man you married. My name is Sarah, and this is the story of how I discovered the most twisted betrayal imaginable, one that involved not just my marriage, but a plan so calculated and cruel that it still gives me chills to think about it. Let me take you back to where it all began. Picture this. A cozy 2-story house in suburban Connecticut, white picket fence, matching his and hers BMWs in the driveway. From the outside, David and I looked like the perfect couple. We'd been married for 4 years, both successful in our careers. He was a financial advisor. I worked in marketing for a tech company. We had everything mapped out. Buy the house, establish our careers, travel a bit, then start a family. That was the plan anyway. The first sign something was wrong came last January. We'd just returned from a New Year's Eve party where David had been unusually quiet, constantly checking his phone. When I reached for him that night, the way I had hundreds of times before, he pulled away like I'd burned him. "I'm just tired, Sarah," he said, rolling to face the wall. Long day, but one night became 1 week. 1 week became 1 month. By March, it had been over 2 months since we'd been intimate, and every attempt I made was met with excuses. Work stress, headaches, he was getting sick, he needed to wake up early. The man who used to pull me close every morning, who couldn't keep his hands off me during our first years of marriage, suddenly acted like I was a stranger sharing his bed. "Maybe we should see someone," I suggested one evening in April, standing in our kitchen while he scrolled through his laptop. "A counselor or—" "There's nothing wrong with us," he snapped, not even looking up. "Not everything is a problem that needs fixing, Sarah." But there was something wrong. I could feel it in the way he avoided eye contact, in how he'd suddenly started working late every Tuesday and Thursday, in the way he'd taken to showering immediately when he came home. Something he'd never done before. The house felt different too. It's strange how a home can change when the people in it are keeping secrets. Every room seemed to echo with unspoken words. Every silence stretched just a little too long. What I didn't know then was that David's distance wasn't random. It wasn't stress, or a midlife crisis, or any of the normal reasons marriages go through rough patches. It was part of something much more sinister. By May, I'd started paying closer attention to David's behavior. Not in a suspicious way. At least, that's what I told myself. I was just trying to understand what was happening to us. That's when I noticed the phone calls. It started with hushed conversations that would end abruptly when I walked into the room. David had always been social, always had friends calling about weekend plans or work colleagues discussing clients. But these calls were different. They happened late at night after he thought I was asleep, or early in the morning while I was in the shower. One Tuesday evening, I was loading the dishwasher when I heard him talking in his office down the hall. The door was closed, but our old house had thin walls. "Can't keep doing this much longer," I heard him say. "She's starting to ask questions." My hands froze on the plate I was rinsing. Who was he talking about? Me? I know, but we agreed on the timeline. Just give me a few more weeks. Timeline? Timeline for what? I crept closer to the office door, my bare feet silent on the hardwood floor. My heart was pounding so loud, I was sure he'd hear it through the walls. "The trust fund requires it," he continued, his voice dropping even lower. "If we don't have a baby by her 30th birthday, everything goes to her sister instead. We've come too far to mess this up now." My blood turned to ice water. Trust fund? What trust fund? And what did having a baby have to do with anything? I stumbled back to the kitchen, my mind reeling. What was David talking about? I didn't have a trust fund. My parents were middle-class teachers who'd scraped together money for my college education, but certainly hadn't left me any inheritance. My sister Emma and I had grown up in the same modest household. There was no family money, no wealthy grandparents, nothing. Unless there was something I didn't know about my family, something David had discovered that I hadn't. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling while David slept peacefully beside me. For the first time in months, his presence didn't comfort me. Instead, I found myself studying his face in the moonlight streaming through our bedroom window, wondering who this man really was. The same man who'd swept me off my feet during our college years, who'd proposed on the beach where we'd had our first date. Who'd cried when I walked down the aisle? Had he been lying to me all along? Or was I imagining things, creating problems where none existed? But I couldn't shake what I'd heard. The specific mention of my 30th birthday, which was coming up in just 4 months, the reference to my sister Emma, the way he'd said, "We've come too far to mess this up now," like he was talking about some kind of long-term plan. The next morning, I tried to act normal. I made coffee, kissed David goodbye when he left for work, went through the motions of my regular routine. But underneath the normalcy, my mind was spinning. During my lunch break, I called Emma. "Hey, stranger," she answered cheerfully. "What's up?" "Emma, this might sound weird, but do you know anything about a trust fund in our family? Maybe something from Grandma or Grandpa that we weren't told about?" There was a long pause. "A trust fund? Sarah, you know Mom and Dad barely had enough to retire on. Where would a trust fund come from?" "I don't know. I heard something and wondered if maybe there was family money we didn't know about." "Who told you there was a trust fund?" I hesitated. I couldn't tell Emma about David's phone call without explaining why I'd been eavesdropping, and I wasn't ready to admit that my marriage was falling apart. "Nobody. I just wondered. You know how sometimes families keep financial secrets?" Emma laughed. "Sarah, we grew up eating mac and cheese 4 nights a week because it was cheap. If there was secret family money, don't you think Mom would have used it to buy name-brand groceries once in a while?" She was right, of course. But then what had David been talking about? That afternoon, I did something I'd never done before. I searched through David's office while he was at work. I felt terrible about it. Invading someone's privacy goes against everything I believe in. But the phone call had planted a seed of doubt that I couldn't ignore. And that seed was growing into something much larger and more terrifying. David's office was meticulously organized, just like everything else in his life. His desk had neat stacks of client files, his bookshelf arranged by height, his computer cables all tucked away. I started with his desk drawers, not even sure what I was looking for. Bills, office supplies, a spare phone charger. Nothing unusual. I moved to the filing cabinet. David kept all our important documents here. Insurance policies, mortgage papers, tax returns. I'd looked through these files dozens of times over the years when we needed something, so I knew what should be there. But today, there was an extra folder, one I'd never seen before. It was labeled SM Research in David's careful handwriting. SM my initials. Sarah Morrison, my maiden name. With trembling hands, I opened the folder. Inside were documents I'd never seen before. Photocopies of what looked like legal papers, bank statements, and at the very top, a family tree that traced my lineage back 4 generations. My great-grandfather's name was at the top, Samuel Morrison. Below him, a web of names and dates I didn't recognize. And at the bottom, circled in red ink, were 2 names, Sarah Morrison Collins and Emma Morrison Walsh. My married name and Emma's married name. Attached to the family tree was a bank statement showing an account with a balance that made me gasp out loud. 7 figures. An account I'd never heard of, held in trust for the eldest daughter of Samuel Morrison's bloodline, to be distributed upon the birth of her first child or her 30th birthday, whichever comes first. The statement was dated 2 years ago. 2 years ago, right around the time David had started pushing harder for us to have children, right around the time he'd begun making comments about how it would be nice to start a family soon, and we're not getting any younger. Comments I'd thought were natural for a married couple in their late 20s, but now I saw them for what they really were. Calculated moves in a plan I was just beginning to understand. My hands were shaking as I continued reading. There were more documents, correspondence between David and a law firm in Boston, emails discussing the subject's family history, and timeline for fund distribution. And then I found the most chilling document of all. It was a private investigator's report, dated 3 months before David and I had even met. 3 months before our chance encounter at a coffee shop near campus, where he'd accidentally spilled his drink on my laptop and insisted on buying me a new one. The report contained everything about me. My class schedule, my favorite study spots, my weekend routines, even photos of me leaving the library, walking across campus, sitting alone at various coffee shops. David had been stalking me for 3 months before we'd ever spoken. Our entire relationship, our accidental meeting, his perfect timing in showing up at places I'd be, even which of my friends he'd befriended first to get closer to me, it had all been planned. I sank into David's office chair, the documents scattered across his desk, and tried to process what I'd discovered. The man I'd fallen in love with, the man I'd married, the man I'd built a life with, he'd never loved me at all. I was just a mark, a target in an elaborate con designed to steal money I'd never even known existed. But if David had been planning this for over 4 years, if he'd married me specifically to get access to this trust fund, then why had he suddenly stopped being intimate with me? Why risk the plan now, just months before my 30th birthday when the money would be released anyway? Unless he'd found out something else. Something that changed everything. I spent the rest of that week pretending everything was normal while my mind raced with questions. Every smile David gave me felt like a lie. Every casual conversation felt like manipulation. When he asked about my day, I wondered if he was gathering intelligence. When he suggested we watch a movie together, I wondered what his real agenda was. But I played along because I needed time to figure out what to do next. The following Tuesday, I was ready for his mysterious phone call. I'd positioned myself in the hallway outside his office with my phone set to record, my heart hammering against my ribs. "She found the documents," I heard David say, and my blood ran cold. Had I not put everything back exactly as I'd found it? Had I left some trace that I'd been snooping through his files? No, not Sarah. Emma. Emma found them. Emma? My sister, Emma. I know we agreed to keep her out of it, but she's been asking questions. Sarah called her about the trust fund last week, and now Emma's been digging around. I pressed myself closer to the wall, straining to hear every word. "Look, here's what I think happened," David continued. "The lawyer probably sent copies of the documents to both sisters when the fund was established. Sarah never opens official-looking mail. You know how she is about boring paperwork. But Emma's more thorough. She probably found the papers and is starting to put pieces together." There was a long pause. "What do you mean, what's the contingency plan? We always knew this was a possibility." My skin felt like ice. Contingency plan? "No, I'm not going to hurt her. That was never part of the deal, but we might have to accelerate the timeline." Hurt her? Hurt who? Me or Emma? If Emma tells Sarah the truth about the money before I can get her pregnant, the whole thing falls apart. Sarah will leave me, and we'll get nothing. No, the casual way he talked about getting me pregnant, like I was livestock being bred for profit, made my stomach turn. I know it's been difficult to perform, knowing what we're really doing, but I need you to understand that we're so close. Sarah's 30th birthday is in 3 months. If I can get her pregnant in the next few weeks, we'll have access to the money for the baby's expenses immediately, and then the full amount when the child is born. Perform? Who was he talking to that would make it difficult to perform with me? And then I heard something that made my knees give out. "I love you too, Marcus. This will all be over soon, and we can finally be together the way we've always wanted. Marcus." I knew that name. Marcus was David's business partner, his best man at our wedding. The friend who'd consoled me when David started pulling away, who'd told me that David was probably just going through a rough patch and that I should be patient with him. The friend who'd hugged me a little too long at parties, who'd always seemed to know exactly what to say when I was feeling insecure about my marriage. David was gay. David was in love with his business partner, and I had been nothing more than a broodmare in an elaborate scheme to steal my inheritance. I stumbled back to the living room, my mind reeling. Everything made sense now. The sudden lack of intimacy. The way David had seemed almost repulsed when I tried to touch him. The guilt in his eyes that I'd mistaken for general marriage troubles. He couldn't stand being intimate with me because he was in love with someone else, someone he'd probably been with throughout our entire marriage. But now he needed to get me pregnant to access the trust fund, which meant he was going to have to force himself to sleep with me. The woman he'd been deceiving for 4 years. The woman whose life he'd stolen, whose heart he'd broken, whose future he was planning to destroy. That night, David came home with flowers and a bottle of wine. "I thought we could have a romantic evening," he said, kissing my cheek in the way that used to make me melt, but now made my skin crawl. "I've been thinking about what you said about seeing a counselor. Maybe we don't need outside help. Maybe we just need to reconnect." He'd set up candles in the dining room, made reservations at the Italian restaurant where we'd had our first official date, even put on the cologne I'd bought him for Christmas. It was a perfect romantic evening, except that I now knew it was all an act. Every smile, every touch, every loving glance was calculated to manipulate me into bed so he could use my body to get access to money that was rightfully mine. "You look beautiful tonight," he said over dinner, reaching across the table to take my hand. I wanted to throw my wine in his face. I wanted to scream that I knew everything, that I'd found his files and heard his phone calls and figured out his twisted plan. Instead, I smiled and squeezed his hand. "Thank you. You look handsome too." Because I needed time. Time to figure out how to protect myself and the money he was trying to steal. Time to contact the lawyers who were managing the trust fund. Time to warn Emma that she might be in danger if David thought she was going to expose him. "Sarah," David said, his voice dropping to that husky tone he used to use when he wanted to be intimate. "I've missed you. I've missed us." The lies came so easily to him. I wondered how many times over the past 4 years he'd sat across from me, telling me he loved me, planning our future together, all while knowing that he was going to destroy my life and disappear with Marcus and my inheritance. "I've missed you too," I said, and I even managed to make it sound sincere. When we got home, David led me to our bedroom, a room that suddenly felt like a crime scene. He dimmed the lights, put on soft music, and began kissing me the way he used to in the early days of our marriage. But I could feel the difference. There was no passion behind his kisses, no genuine desire in his touch. He was going through the motions, playing a part, forcing himself to be intimate with someone he felt nothing for. It was the most horrible, violating experience of my life. Worse than if he'd been cheating with another woman, because at least that would have involved actual human emotion. This was cold, calculated, mechanical. When it was over, David held me close and whispered, "I love you, Sarah. I want us to have a baby together." I bit my tongue so hard, I tasted blood to keep from screaming. The next morning, David was up early, humming in the shower, making breakfast with more energy than I'd seen from him in months. He kissed me goodbye and told me he was excited about our future together. The moment his car pulled out of the driveway, I was on the phone with Emma. "Emma, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Do not go home today. Do not go anywhere alone. Come to my office, and we'll talk there." "Sarah, what's wrong? You're scaring me. Just promise me you'll come to my office. And Emma, if David calls you or tries to contact you, do not tell him where you are or what we've discussed. Promise me." There was a long pause. "Sarah, what the hell is going on? I'll explain everything when you get here. Just promise me you'll be careful." An hour later, Emma was sitting in my office conference room, staring at the photocopied documents I'd stolen from David's files. "This is impossible," she kept saying. "We don't have rich relatives. We would have known." "Apparently we do, and we didn't," I said. "The question is, what are we going to do about it?" Emma looked up from the papers, her face pale. "Sarah, if what you're telling me is true, if David only married you to get this money, then you're in real danger. If he's willing to lie and manipulate for 4 years, what else is he willing to do?" I'd been wondering the same thing. What was David's endgame? Get me pregnant, access the trust fund, and then what? Divorce me and disappear with Marcus? Or was there a more permanent solution he was considering? "I've been thinking about that," I said, "and I think I know how to find out." That evening, I told David I wasn't feeling well and went to bed early. But instead of sleeping, I waited. At 11:47 p.m., I heard his office door close and the familiar sound of him dialing. This time, I didn't just listen from the hallway. I crept downstairs and positioned myself right outside his office door with my phone recording. "It worked," I heard him say. "We had sex last night for the first time in months." The clinical way he described our intimate moment made me feel sick all over again. "I know it's hard for you too, Marcus, but we're so close now. If she gets pregnant in the next few weeks, we'll have everything we've worked for." There was a pause, and then David's voice took on a harder edge. "What do you mean Emma's been asking more questions? What kind of questions?" My heart started racing. Emma had promised me she wouldn't contact anyone about the trust fund until we figured out a plan. She called the law firm? When? "Oh no. Emma, what did you do?" Okay, don't panic. What exactly did she tell them?" I pressed my ear closer to the door, straining to hear David's side of the conversation. She told them she was concerned about fraud, that she thought someone might be trying to manipulate Sarah into accessing the fund. My sister was trying to protect me, but she might have just made everything much worse. "No, Marcus," We can't let them freeze the account. We're too close." There was another long pause, and when David spoke again, his voice was completely different. Cold. Calculating. Nothing like the man I'd married. "I know we said we wouldn't hurt anyone, but the situation has changed. If the lawyers start investigating, they'll discover everything. The fake identity I used to get close to Sarah, the private investigator, all of it. Fake identity. My real name, Marcus. They'll discover my real name isn't David Collins." I felt like I was falling through space. My husband wasn't even who I thought he was. The man I'd been married to for 4 years was a complete stranger. "Look, here's what we're going to do. Tomorrow is Friday. I'll tell Sarah we should go away for the weekend, somewhere romantic to celebrate our reconnection, a cabin in the mountains maybe, somewhere private." The way he said private made my blood turn to ice. "Once we're there, we'll stage an accident. A hiking accident maybe. Sarah falls off a cliff or gets lost in the woods. Tragic ending to a romantic getaway." I couldn't breathe. David was planning to kill me. I know. But if she's already pregnant, the baby will inherit the money. And as the grieving widower, I'll have control over the child's inheritance until they turn 21. That's 21 years of access to millions of dollars, Marcus. Enough for us to disappear and start over anywhere in the world. And if she's not pregnant yet? I heard David sigh. Then we'll have to hope the lawyers don't freeze the account before her 30th birthday. But either way, Sarah can't be allowed to find out the truth. She's too dangerous to us now. I backed away from the door, my whole body shaking. I had to get out of the house. I had to call the police. I had to warn Emma that she might be in danger too. But as I turned to creep back upstairs, the office door opened. David stood there in his pajamas, his phone still in his hand, staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Cold, calculating, completely devoid of any warmth or humanity. "How much did you hear, Sarah?" I tried to run, but he caught my arm before I'd taken 3 steps. "Sarah, wait. We need to talk. Let go of me." I tried to pull away, but his grip tightened. "You weren't supposed to find out this way," he said, his voice eerily calm. "I wanted to make this easy for you." "Easy for me? You were planning to kill me." "Only if necessary. If you'd gotten pregnant like you were supposed to, you could have lived. You could have raised the child and been happy. I would have been a good father, Sarah, a good husband. We could have made it work." The casual way he talked about murdering me, like it was just another item on his to-do list, was more terrifying than if he'd been screaming and violent. "But now you know too much," he continued. "And Emma knows too much, and the lawyers are asking questions." "The police will figure it out," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "If something happens to me right after Emma called the lawyers about the trust fund, they'll investigate." David smiled, and it was the most chilling thing I'd ever seen. "Sarah, my love, I've been planning this for over 4 years. Do you really think I don't have contingencies?" He was right, and we both knew it. David, or whatever his real name was, had been 3 steps ahead of me this entire time. He'd probably already figured out how to make my death look accidental, how to deflect suspicion, how to access the money even if the lawyers were asking questions. "Marcus is already on his way over," David said, glancing at his phone. "We're going to have to move up our timeline a bit, but that's okay. We're flexible." I had maybe 15 minutes before Marcus arrived. 15 minutes to figure out how to save my life and expose the man who'd stolen 4 years of it. "David," I said, trying a different approach, "you don't have to do this. We can work something out. I'll give you half the money, more than half. You can disappear with Marcus, and I'll never tell anyone what you did." He actually looked like he was considering it for a moment. "You know, Sarah, in another life, I might have actually fallen in love with you. You're kind, you're intelligent, you're generous. Even now, facing death, you're trying to find a way for everyone to win." His grip on my arm loosened slightly. "But the problem is, I can't trust you, and I can't trust Emma. And now that the lawyers are involved, I can't trust that this secret will stay buried." I saw my chance and took it. I yanked my arm free and ran for the front door, but David was faster. He tackled me in the hallway, and we both went down hard on the hardwood floor. "I really am sorry, Sarah," he said, pinning me down. "For what it's worth, these 4 years weren't completely miserable. You're a good person. You deserve better than this." I could see headlights pulling into our driveway. Marcus had arrived, but then I heard something else. Something that made David freeze too. Sirens. Police sirens, getting louder by the second. David's face went white. "What did you do?" "I called 911 before I came downstairs," I lied. I hadn't, but I needed him to think help was coming. The sirens were getting closer, and now I could see red and blue lights flashing through our front windows. David jumped up and ran to look outside. "There are 3 police cars," he said, his calm demeanor finally cracking. "How did they know to come here?" I didn't know either, but I wasn't about to question a miracle. The sirens stopped right outside our house and someone was pounding on the front door. "Police, open up!" David looked at me with a mixture of rage and desperation. For a moment, I thought he might try to kill me anyway, even with the police outside. But then the pounding got louder, and I heard an officer shout that they were coming in. The front door burst open, and suddenly our living room was full of uniformed officers with their weapons drawn. "David Collins, you're under arrest," one of them said. "Actually," another officer said, consulting a piece of paper, "it's David Marcus Sullivan, real name. We've been looking for you for a long time, Mr. Sullivan." As they handcuffed David, he looked at me one last time. "You really didn't call them, did you?" he said. I shook my head. "Then who did?" one of the officers answered. "Your business partner, Marcus Webb. Turns out he's been cooperating with the FBI for the past 6 months. You're not the only woman you've done this to, Mr. Sullivan." David's face went through a series of emotions. Shock, betrayal, and finally, a kind of defeated acceptance. "How many others?" I asked the officer. "At least 4 that we know of. Similar pattern every time. He researches women from wealthy families, creates a false identity, courts them, marries them, and then finds a way to access their money, usually by killing them and inheriting their assets." I sank onto our couch, the same couch where David and I had watched movies together, where we'd planned our future, where he'd held me when I was sick, the same couch where a sociopath had been planning my murder. "The other women," I said quietly, "did he—" The officer nodded grimly. 3 of them died in what appeared to be accidents. Hiking accidents, car crashes, a drowning. We've been building a case against him for 2 years, but we needed someone on the inside. "Marcus?" Marcus Webb came to us 6 months ago. Apparently he'd figured out what Sullivan was doing and wanted out. We convinced him to help us gather evidence. As they led David away, he turned back to me one more time. "Sarah," he called out, "I really am sorry. In my own way, I did care about you." I didn't respond. What was there to say to a man who'd planned to murder me after breakfast? Resolution 323034 Wanks. That was 6 months ago. David, or David Marcus Sullivan, as I learned his real name was, is currently serving life in prison without the possibility of parole. The prosecution was able to connect him to the deaths of 3 other women and the attempted murder of a 4th. It turns out I wasn't his first wife. He'd been running marriage cons for over a decade. Marcus Webb testified against him in exchange for a reduced sentence. He's serving 2 years for conspiracy and fraud, but the judge took into account his cooperation with the FBI. I still can't decide how I feel about that. Marcus helped save my life, but he also helped plan to destroy it in the first place. The trust fund was real. It turns out my great-grandfather Samuel Morrison had invested in some early technology companies that became worth millions over the decades. The lawyers managing the fund had been trying to contact Emma and me for months, but their letters had been intercepted by David, who'd been monitoring our mail. Emma and I each inherited $3.2 million on our 30th birthdays. Money we never knew existed, from a family legacy we'd never heard of. I donated half of mine to organizations that help women escape domestic abuse. It felt right, somehow, turning something that had nearly destroyed me into something that could help other women. I moved out of the house in Connecticut. Too many memories, too many lies. I'm living in a small apartment in Boston now, going to therapy twice a week, and slowly rebuilding my sense of trust in people. The hardest part isn't the money or even the betrayal. It's realizing that the man I fell in love with, the man I married, the man I was planning to have children with, that man never existed at all. David Collins was a character David Sullivan played for 4 years. Every kiss, every laugh, every shared moment was part of an elaborate performance designed to steal my life. Sometimes I wonder who I would have been if I'd never met him, who I would have fallen in love with, what kind of life I would have built, who I really am when I'm not trying to please someone who was planning to kill me. But I'm starting to figure it out, and for the first time in months, I'm excited about the future. A future that's finally, truly mine. The one question I still can't answer is this: how do you learn to trust again when the person you trusted most in the world was planning your murder? I guess I'll figure that out too, one day at a time.